I've never seen a diamond in the flesh. I cut my teeth on wedding rings.
Dude, that's pretty cool.
Man, that is a sad clown.
Dude, that's pretty good.
This is The Gloom, bringing you weekly interviews with F3 Omaha packs, exploring their F3 experiences and finding those sticky elements that create the glue in the gloom.
Shout out to our sponsors. Major Team Mortgage, Omaha Laser Dentistry, Exclusively Eye Care, Liberty Core Real Estate, Avier Wealth Management, and Apex Men's Clinic. We appreciate their support.
What's it like to love your dentist? Well, you're about to find out, where healthy smiles go beyond your teeth. No drilling, no needles, and no anxiety. Relax, it's Omaha Laser Dentistry. Welcome to better. At Omaha Laser Dentistry, Dr. Bullenparty uses the Solea laser, a CO2 laser that's used in all of his day-to-day patient care. He provides thorough exams, assessments, and treatments for things like snoring, tethered tissue, and extractions like wisdom teeth, as well as other surgeries. Check him out today at omahalaserdentistry.com. Discounts may be available for F3 Omaha members.
Now let's get back to the gloom.
And we're back. Man, I'm excited for this guy, and not just because he was a leader at the best Wednesday site in all of the land, but also because I've got to know him and just really love his passion for helping guys find out who they are and find out why they're valuable. I'm also curious, based on this guy's nickname, I don't know if he's going to say a whole lot. And so I'm curious what we're going to get out of our buddy Tightlip here, who's former site Q at Paradise, and just love to see that smile, brother. Why don't you take us back to the beginning, kind of first, who he H'd you first workout, and then how did we get the name Tightlip?
Yeah. So, I mean, the name Tightlip, it's sometimes true, but mostly a lie. So my onboarding to F3 was just, is a little different. So I was in counseling at the time, and I'm a huge proponent of just that mental health and if you need to talk to someone to unpack some stuff, man, talk to them before it gets real bad. So I was in one of those cycles where I was just kind of needing to process a little bit. And I was talking to my counselor one day, about physical fitness. And I shared an experience that I had. I went into kind of a CrossFit-ish gym. I was talking to the owner. It's my big goal is I just want to be able to do a Murph, I just want to be able to knock out 100 pull-ups and, do all the things. And my experience talking with this individual is he was well, he wants you, to be committed to come in 4 days a week. And, it was just real hardcore. I'm like, oh, okay, buddy. I'm going to give you 2 days a week, maybe 3, I'll give you my money. Do you want my money or not? It's just a real experience. So I'm sharing with my counselor, this exchange, and he's like, I haven't never been, but I've heard about this group. They're a little intense, it seems like, but you're kind of intense too. So maybe where you guys can, you'll fit in. And so he told me about it, and I looked it up, and I was like, this seems cool. Workouts start at 5:30. That's not a thing. That's not happening. Yeah. But then after a couple of months, I revisited, circled back, it's kind of one of those things of from a fitness standpoint, I've never been tremendously overweight, but there's times where you look yourself in the mirror and you're like, I don't like where that's going. And I was kind of at that phase of, body self-image stuff and, tipping the scales north of 190. It's I don't like where this is going. I need to maybe get serious about this. And there is a site. It's still there. I don't work there anymore, but the site's still there, so that's good. But Mess Hall Coop, I'm at Swanson Elementary. It's 3 blocks away from where I used to work, so I could drive to work, jog over there, do a workout, and then get back to work, shower there, start my day and all that good stuff. And so that's what I opted to do one day is decided that it was going to be a thing. And I kind of quietly did a lot of research on F3. I felt like it was, men's fellowship fitness. It checked all the boxes. And, I kind of had observed that F3 Omaha does everything through Twitter. So creating myself a good Twitter account. Back when I had a Twitter account, I liked that my profile picture had this obnoxious, Hawaiian shirt, which just really isn't my character, with my sunglasses on. It just looked like the most like up account ever. But so I, just had this, kind of getting ready to just cannonball into it all. So decided it was going to be, they asked questions like, hey, where's this group meet, yada, yada. And, end up showing up to the workout the next day, and Tater Tot happened to be on the queue. And then, go through the intro. And I kind of thought the intro was like, oh, well, there's a new guy here. So they're kind of going through this whole spiel. Okay, well, I read all this stuff, but okay, that's cool. You're telling me about it. Not realizing, how important that is to our F3 Omaha culture, and making sure that we say those, mission statement, core values, every single time. It really does matter. Go through all those, so forth and so on, what have you, all this stuff. And he pairs me up with the khakis. Khakis is going to be my, and, I can be a fairly intense guy. Khakis can be a fairly intense guy. And
Sure.
I just love that my introduction to F3 couldn't have been more solid. Taking out on the queue and then having khakis by my side, quiet. And what I loved about khakis, and still do, is his quiet encouragement. He'll get loud and boisterous when something needs to be corrected, but like when that guy compliments you, it's real. Like it's, you earned it. He's there cheering you on. I wasn't nearly in as great a shape as I was then. So by the time I got to my 7th burpee, where I was foolishly jumping as high as I could, because, try hard, right?
Right. Yeah, sure.
But get through that first workout, and then coming up to Namarama, there's like I kind of showed up, and, they asked me, like, oh, who brought you out? And like, or who told you about it? And it's like, I'm here on my own. Who told you about it? It's like, oh, just a friend of a friend. I had gathered enough from reading the websites and everything like that, like, this was going to be a safe place, and be like, my counselor told me about it,
Yeah.
And, selfishly or otherwise, I just didn't want that to be my first impression to the group. So I just kind of, friend of a friend was who introduced this to me. They kind of got like the sideways head bob, like, oh, okay, and we kind of carry on the next day. Talked a little bit about, my background and some of the places I've been and stuff like that. But it was, the morning's going to move along, get ready for it and go. So at the end, got me in the circle for my Namarama, and, Tater's like, tell us a little bit about yourself, and, kind of run through the spiel of, I'm a Jesus guy, I used to be an okay runner, whatever else kind of came to mind. He's like, well, you got any embarrassing stories? Like, yeah. He goes, you gonna tell us any? Nope. And basically that's how you get the name Tight Lips. So my favorite joke is, if I'm running along somebody new, and I love the convention of what the names do in F3. It's such a place to build a conversation from. My favorite, one-liner is, new guys like, oh, how do you get your name? I was like, I don't talk about it. It just, it gets that chuckle.
No, that's a great response.
We can unpack the conversation more if we're not doing burpees, or, we can,
Well, that's great, man. Well, and I want to go back to something you said early on about your fitness journey until you found F3. When I think of Tight Lip, I just think of, God, this guy's a hammer, and he just keeps going, and he's got a motor. So to hear you say, like, hey, I was in a place where I wasn't feeling pretty good about myself, and that kind of helped me lean in here. I guess maybe like kind of unpack some of that for us. What has your fitness journey been up until F3?
It's never been consistent. I was like a good runner in like middle school, high school, that kind of stuff. But there's always like, 3, 4, 5 guys who are better than me. It turns out that's still the case. And through just, I fancy myself a late bloomer in life. And so, it turns out, being first is great, but you don't always need to be first to be doing well. And that's taken me a good while to kind of realize and accept. And so, so many times in the past, I would try to do something, or I'd come up short, and then I'd come up short. I'm like, well, I didn't realize my goal and my potential, so like I'm just giving up. I can look back in a lot of aspects of my life where that was the case. And then after high school, joined the military. I was pretty fit in the military. Did military workout stuff. It is what it was. Everyone's reasonably in good shape there, or something like that. Then got out, and much like the beginning, I was like, I'd look in the mirror and I'd be like, well, nope, it's time to go running again. And back then, like a 2-mile run was, reasonably like a mid run. And, maybe if I was feeling extra motivated, I'd go like 3.5 to 5 miles. One time I ran 7 miles, and maybe I'd do that, once or twice a week for 3 or 4 weeks and melt some pounds off and, get distracted, peter out, whatever that was. It just kind of went on and on. Probably like 2 or 3 years ago, before I joined F3, I attempted my first Murph, and everything was all well and good except for the pull-ups. I think I got to like 66 pull-ups, and even to this day, actually, I still have yet to complete a full Murph. I mean, I've done, double Murphs, and I attempted a triple Murph before I had a shoulder whoopsie. But like I'll typically just like, do sets of 5 or sets of 6 or something like that. And again, that kind of goes back to the giving myself permission to not have to be achieving perfectly. Anyways, I was trying to do those pull-ups. I was trying to do them all perfectly. I knocked out, 66 of those, and my arms have never been more sore my entire life. Like, I could not get my elbows above my shoulder plane without being in agony. I couldn't do a push-up for like, legitimately, like, could not hold myself in a push-up for like 2 days after that. I mean, I just destroyed myself because I had no prep going into it. Obviously, that was a pretty poignant, moment in my fitness journey, and something I was like, I want to be able to do better than that. And so I think that's, fast forward a couple of years later, I'm like, beginning to lean into F3. It was, kind of with that in mind a little bit. But going back just to my first workout, I also want to talk about my second workout, because after my first workout, I was tired. I was beat down, worn down. I was sore. The next day, like, I was sore in places that I not sure I'd ever been sore, or I didn't realize maybe could be. And it wasn't like a particularly grueling workout. It wasn't anything that like chicklets would throw at you or anything like that, but it was, tough enough. And I had like so I posted at mess hall for the first time, and I knew I was going to take Wednesday off. And then I was like, okay, they posted the same place on Thursday, so I'm going to go back to the Thursday workout at the Coop. And I had like tried to tell myself the lie that when I looked at the schedule, it's like, oh, the mess hall only meets on Tuesdays, so maybe they're not meeting Thursday and I won't have to go. So I shot the mess hall a message on Twitter, saying, hey, you guys only meet on Tuesdays, so you won't be there on Thursday, right? And like, I went to bed. Like, I woke up the next morning in time to be able to go to the Thursday workout. And so like, wake up in the morning, kind of with more routine. I'm sitting on the can, and I like see this message notification on my phone, and I read it, and it's like, oh no, it's just called something different. They'll still be there. Good job getting after. And like, I'm sitting there,
shit, I gotta go now.
Man, I'm okay. I have to go. And it was awful. That first like three weeks of F3, I've never done more push-ups on my knees in my entire life. Like, it wasn't like a point of pride necessarily, but it was just like an awareness that like, okay, I've, late 30s, like life's just different now. I gotta, it's about doing more than appearing. And that again, maybe it's some of that late bloomer, realization of how to do life better.
Well, there's a ton to unpack there. I didn't realize you were in the military, so thank you for your service. First of all, what branch were you in, if you don't mind me asking?
I was in the Navy. It was my honor to serve, so appreciate it.
Okay, I love it. And then I guess I would be curious, because I know you've done all sorts of what I would consider ultra running, right? And so I guess I'm curious, like, at what point in your journey did that become a thing, or like, how did you step into that? Was it halfway house, or did you just start doing the 48-hour dizzy goat, or how'd you get into that?
Yeah, so way before I even joined F3, the concept of a 30-mile run seemed interesting to me. Like, running is, even to this day, I have a hard time paying for like the good life halvesy. Like, I can go do that for free. I don't pay $55 to do that or whatever. It sounds like a fun time, and I'll probably do it sometime, especially now that I've thrown that out in the universe. But like, the 30-mile run always seemed interesting to me, because it's like, okay, mile is like I probably would have told you like, or a marathon is probably, like 24 miles, probably would have told you back then. But, it's like, there's only 5 more miles to get to 30. Like, why not just get to a good round number? And so I always kind of had some kind of attraction to that. Like, it just always seemed interesting to me. And then, so I started doing F3 in late August, and then made it through the winter time. And then I think it was sometime in March, I was introduced to, maybe a little bit earlier, but I was introduced to the concept of a 4x4 by 48. So it's running 4 miles every 4 hours, 48 hours. And I was like, that seems really like, that's accessible. Like, it's, not to say it's not challenging, but it's like, it's 1 4-mile run every 4 hours for 2 days, like, it's not.
How many does that end up being? I'm not very good at math.
Yeah. And so, I'm glad you asked about that, because actually I'd love to give a good plug to, like, we need to get more packs doing that, because you unlock something in your realized potential when you do stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying it was easy, but it's much easier than you think it is. I think most of it comes down to logistics and just putting your shoes on and going, recognizing like, you're not going to get perfect sleep, but you'll be okay. The hardest part is, figuring out the diet side, and then making sure you have like clean laundry. Like, cause I don't know if you have pairs of running socks, but like, that's kind of part of the logistics of it, is like, well, what am I going to wear? What am I going to change into? Where am I going to run? What was really special about that too is, I kind of put it out there on Slack, what I was doing, and the amount of packs that showed up during those runs was really special. I did some really good relationship building during that time, actually. In particular, and I don't want to like leave anybody out, but there's just one standout guy, from that experience, and that'd be Baby Shoes. So it was, and maybe I guess I should start at the beginning. I kicked off at like 4 a.m. on a Friday, and Griswold, hard hat, and kickstand. They showed up and they kind of sent me off, and it was just a great get out there, first run, 4 a.m. And I had a few. I think I had a guy show up like maybe my 8 p.m. run the first day. I didn't have somebody with me, but then I start my midnight run, and there's a little hill down my neighborhood, and that's kind of the rally point I pointed guys at. They pick up with me from there, and we'd go do our out and back on the little access road by my house. And there's no one there, and it's all good. And I'm kind of like, letting the hips loosen up a little bit, because I'm definitely starting to get a little tight at that point. And the course I was running, there's right by the Miller Airport, there's a half-mile access road. And so I was just doing there and backs, because it was, one of those things like you can ask Tater, slow pitch, like I'm a safety risk adverse guy. So like I wanted to make sure I had all the safety cards stacked in my deck. So I want to be on like a road where there's minimal traffic. I want to make sure I'm not fighting hills, all that, something does go wrong, I want to be close to home. So I picked my route and intentionally there. But because it's only a half mile, I would do like a there and back on that road just to get my distances in. And I'm by myself, I'm trotting it out. And all of a sudden I hear, "Hey, tight lip." I'm like, "What the heck? Whoa, what's going on?" And I turn around and it's Baby Shoes. And I had seen on one of the socials that Baby Shoes had his graduation party that day. And it's like, here's this young man who's 21, engaged, he shows up for me to run, 4 miles with me, at midnight. Like, I don't know very many 21-year-olds at all that would show up and do that. And what's more is like the conversations that we had during that time and the relationship building we got to do, it was just unique and special. It was, just definitely one of the highlight conversations that I didn't expect to have. But likewise, there's, other relationship building I was able to do during that event that was just really fantastic and special. And then so during that time, kind of much like well, hey, 30 miles, it's, only like, 4 miles longer than a marathon. So like do that. So I also was like, with the 4x4 by 48, it's like, well, I'm already out here running. Like, I'll just run like an extra mile or an extra 2 miles while I'm out there. So I was able to wrap with, I think it was like 65, give or take a mile.
Good Lord.
with that. But it was, yeah, what was beautiful about that for me and what I want for other packs in that is to realize like the overcoming of that, like the realize, like, yeah, you can do that. Cause I mean, by midnight, especially on that first midnight, I was like, realizing like, okay, I'm getting sore. I'm having some tightness in some areas, whatever. I'm going to need to like shift and play the long game here and, slow down a little bit. And sure enough, if you guys have ran with baby shoes, that like, his slow ain't that slow. So I logged my fastest mile of that weekend with him. It was like I think it was like a 750 or something like that. And maybe it wasn't quite that fast even, but like I'm targeting like 9:15, 10 minute. Like that's where I want to be. Mm-hmm. And he's dragging me into the eights for sure. So
yeah, I love that. It's so cool. Just the, what I keep hearing you say, right, is sort of learning or teaching yourself, right, that you can overcome, these obstacles and sort of the, for me at least, and I think part of what you're saying is when you do that in a physical fitness sort of realm, you teach yourself that you can do it in other realms as well. And so I love that. I think it's such a great sort of foundation for what we do as a group. I would be curious, as you think about your time in F3, kind of segueing to the second FP. So you show up, you didn't necessarily have anybody specific you or bring you into the group. How did you go about that, sort of developing relationships? Was it through those fitness sort of challenges, or was there some other way that you went about getting to know the guys and building relationships?
Yeah, so I was fortunate in the sense that I had an okay social circle that existed prior to F3. In particular, in my church, they have a Men of God group. They meet every Friday morning. So I had like kind of a core group of guys from that table that I had existing friendships and relationships with. But like, one thing about myself is, I do appreciate a kind of like deeper conversation. I don't particularly enjoy like, passive casual talk. I'd rather just like get to it. And so it was just a matter of like, finding a relationship in the gloom, essentially, at the workout. Went to several cafeterias and still do show up to cafeteria, but like, I know everyone says the relationship building happens at cafeteria. Like I can't say that's my truth. It's good casual banter there. But I think relationship building happens when you're, on a string of pearls run and you're between stations, where it can happen, of course, during pre-running, but that's, that's kind of like the next step of, the F3 journey. But what I really enjoy about F3 is, when you're out there in the morning and you're, Bernie Sandering up a hill and it kind of sucks. And you look over and there's a guy next to you and he's like, yeah, this kind of sucks, but like, hey, we're doing it still. You're putting in the work and you're making yourself better. And Pony, you kind of mentioned the enduring nature, and it's how I've grown and applied that in my personal life really is to realize that when it gets hard, I still can keep trying, and I might not be executing at the performance level I had previously been executing at, but it's, it's that effort still matters.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear you talking about having friendships previously to F3. I am curious if you got any of those guys out from your church group.
Yeah, I sure do. So what I like to kind of joke around about internally with those guys is, so Hi-Hat, Hindsight, Cake, Taser. I might be missing, EGOT. I might be missing one more yet. And then I have a couple other like, family relatives in town and brought them out. But, Cake's got like 10 EHs under his belt. And so like, from the pyramid scheme standpoint, like I'm pretty proud of my EH tree, but I probably owe him a credit.
That's awesome. On the second F piece, so you mentioned kind of getting to know guys just by being out there, but what do you think it was that sort of catapulted your relationships within F3? Was it, it wasn't coffee, right? It was maybe some of the longer runs, but things like Q source or shield locks or, any of those other pieces that you would care to talk us through?
Yeah. So, 100%, I think Q source is the best way to really begin establishing relationships, because that was, at Q source, that conversation, it's guided. Like, hey, we're going to talk about this topic today, and we're going to kind of focus our attention on that. And just through the collective life experience of the guys around the table, and how they choose to share, it's going to create opportunity for deeper dialogue. And so there's been a lot of good kind of relationship awareness that just comes out of that experience naturally. So I've always enjoyed a good Q source discussion. I'd like to see more guys become part of it. I got into Q source pretty early on, and so admittedly, there's a few things within like F3 that I kind of think of them as like, oh, well, everyone knows this. And I don't really have any great examples that, at the ready here, but like, there's like, that's just the way we do things. And I'm like, so much of my thought process with that is because that's like an integral part of what we've covered at Q source repeatedly at nauseum. And like, so of course that's part of our culture. Well, even if you're in F3, but you've never really gone to Q source, you've only gone to a couple, like you're missing a chunk of that, like interpersonal skill building, availability by not, being exposed to that or participating in it. So, for as much as F3 does for the first F, I think when it comes to social, the second and third F really round out well in Q source. And as far as like your own interpersonal development, I mean, Q source really does a great job of exercising you in a way that it's difficult to get that type of exercise otherwise.
I remember, you contributing to the conversation really early on and just really thinking, kind of noticing, right, that you had a knack for that, or kind of like you mentioned, right, you like the deeper conversations. And, to your point, right, this is like F3's leadership development content, right, that kind of crosses over not just leadership, but there's some bigger faith pieces. What would you say, to, I don't know if you give a high level summary, or how have you maybe EH'd guys to Q source, or what would you say to a guy that's maybe been to one or two but hasn't been back? How would you sort of explain it to them in a way that might encourage them to go back again?
Yeah, I would encourage a guy to go back multiple times. So I've had the opportunity to go to the same Q source topic in the same week. Mine was on Wednesday, and then I go to maybe I go to one at Combine or Whetstone, and they're covering the same topic, but the conversations went entirely differently. So if you went to Q source and like, maybe there was one guy who was really going through something, really monopolized the time, and the conversation is kind of flat, or was a little too heavy, or was, just not your cup of tea, just go back and be even if you're not going to be a participant, just be a listener. I mean, there's guys who, aren't big participants, but they show up and they listen. And then when they do talk, they typically have something really good to say. I'm not going to out them here, but there's a couple guys, that from my time at Paradise, they showed up, at least 35 Q sources out of the year, probably more. Not big talkers, but, you could tell they were still being fed by it. So don't feel like if you show up and you're uncomfortable, sharing about whatever that topic is in a vulnerable place, you don't have to tell your deepest secrets there. Let the wisdom of the guys who have kind of gone through it before you, let that wash over you a bit. And then, because there's been some great relationship building that's kind of come from that too, because maybe you're not going to be there to share everything, but you're going to be able to quietly go up next to a guy and be like, hey, I'm going through something similar, or I have gone through something similar. So you might be able to pour into somebody, or somebody may be able to pour into you. Likewise, it's a good segue into the topic of shield locks too. There's a pretty early on in Q source, we were covering shield locks, and give him a tremendous amount of credit. His honeymate comes up to me like right afterwards, and he's like, hey, I forget the exact phrase, but it's basically like, hey, you want to be a shield lock? And, or you want to form one? And I was like, yeah, that seems like the right thing to do. And so we bantered back and forth for a little bit and figure out who to pull in, and, got Dirty Bird and Stella in there. And, we were, just trying to find our way, because like we knew that this thing that F3 talked about in shield lock is a good thing. And yeah, so we had the four of us, and then eventually we brought in Invictus, and then I had some different life things going on, so I kind of stepped away from that group. They brought in, I think Tom Tom is maybe still in it. I hope they don't mind me out in their whole group. But what was great about that group is, and I'm pretty sure they still do it today, is every couple of weeks they get together for their own Shield Lock beatdown and maintain that intentional relationship. I've kind of reverted back to a little bit of my peer group from my Men of God table days previous to F3, and I've kind of leaned tighter into that group since then. But yeah, that having that core group of guys for accountability, friendship, and fellowship, it's awesome and it matters.
I'd be curious, what was your big takeaway from the Shield Lock itself? And I think you're describing something that happens to all guys, right? We go through different seasons of life where Shield Lock works for me right now, but now I'm leaning more into my Men of God group or whatever you call it. But I am generally curious, what your takeaway was from the Shield Lock and where you saw real positivity in it.
Yeah, and I mean, the truth is, I still consider myself as part of a Shield Lock. It's just kind of a conglomerate of different organizations, but I think we would still consider ourselves a Shield Lock as well. I think, in looking at the Concentrica and realizing that Shield Lock is a group of men who are going to rally around you and you can call upon when something is difficult and challenging, and they'll be there to support you. And likewise, I'd be there to support them. I'd call it an intentional relationship. There's components of like accountability and intentional, relational rhythm that are fruitful to be participants in. And I think it's difficult to like apply that broadly to like how to with every single group of guys, because the first Shield Lock I was part of it, it's different than the second Shield Lock I was part of it, but both are great and both have their strengths.
Yeah, I love it. And I love, because some guys will ask like, well, what's a Shield Lock? What's that all about? And the answer to that is, well, go check out QSource, right? To learn more about it. And I would be curious, I over the years have heard some, just varying feedback. I love QSource, and when I'm in my best rhythm, I'm hitting a QSource once a week. And so I would be curious from your perspective, like, what's maybe a topic, like one of your favorite topics from QSource that you feel like guys would benefit from, but maybe not realize is part of the QSource discussions?
Yeah, accountability, missionality. The missionality, that's approached in different ways. I mean, so QSource is broken into 4 quadrants, and so there's group missionality, and then there's the internal missionality of being intentional. And I think through that QSource discussion, you have the opportunity to have a refined perspective on whatever problem you're approaching. I think one of the things that has made F3 Omaha so successful is it hasn't lost sight of its roots. When you're trying to introduce something new from the outside, or well, does it go against our 5 core principles? Does this support our mission statement? If it supports our 5 core principles and it doesn't go against our mission statement, like, okay, yeah, let's give this thing a shot. I think likewise with life, like if you have a mission statement for your life, or a business objective, or you're trying to cultivate a relationship intentionally, and you kind of learn how to focus on what you're trying to achieve, and you press away all the distractions and the noise and just really allow yourself to focus, you yield a better result. And I think there's so many topics in QSource that shine a light on that, the intentionality, and that's where the real benefit lies.
Heck yeah. Really well said. I love that. It's for me, I occasionally I'll hear guys say, well, that's just F3's sort of doctrine, right? You want to indoctrinate me into the, sort of brainwash with all the material. And honestly, I think what I've loved over the years with QSource is it really just serves as sort of this, it's the guide to this conversation that none of us could ever plan for, who's going to be there, what they're going to be going through, and what they might say. And the learnings that you take away from that are just, yeah, I don't know, it's just invaluable information. And then you sort of identify like, oh, this guy has been through what I'm going through. I might reach out to him and have a separate conversation because I value his opinion or perspective. So just, yeah, I would just echo, guys, if you haven't been to a Q source and you're listening to this, it'd be okay to skip a gloom episode and go to a Q source discussion.
Absolutely. Yeah, to your point though, I'd also offer like it's okay to not agree with the content there too. I mean, because there's a few things I'll have a wrinkled eyebrow about, like I don't know about that one. Yeah. And maybe you find there's some truth in it later, and maybe you don't. But it's not like you gotta drink every ounce of the Kool-Aid. You can just sip for a little while and again just absorb the conversation, because that richness of relationship that comes out of that is so awesome.
Well, spot on, right? And remember, the content was written by a lawyer who Pony has proven, like, most lawyers can't even do math. So, like, I mean, I think if you just, no, I couldn't agree more. I think that's the key, right? Is like, you don't have to agree with every, and as a matter of fact, if you don't agree, even better for you to show up and bring that perspective to the group, right? I mean, I think. Are you or someone you know in the market to buy a new home? Well, if so, check out Major Team Mortgage. They specialize in home purchase and refinance home loans. Their mission is to purposely empower people to experience their good life through building wealth with real estate. Showing up in the gloom is no different than showing up for a conversation around your future of building wealth with real estate. Join the action economy and get in the game with Sasquatch. Text or call John at 402-212-0149 to schedule a time today. Individual NMLS number 1393750. Company NMLS number 2478164. Equal housing lender. Yeah, that's the beautiful thing of it all. We could talk Q source for hours, I'm sure, tight lip, but I do want to get your thoughts, because you've referenced a couple times this Men of God group and really kind of the central piece of faith in your life. And so I would just love to hear what's been your journey, and sort of would be curious, like, how did you get to the place where you are now, where you have this really strong faith system?
So I kind of forgot this part of the show. So for me, I grew up Catholic, kind of like church funerals. My mom put me in CCD, so kind of went through the steps of confirmation, all that good stuff. But I wasn't really connected to faith very much. And then so I joined the Navy, and I joined the Navy in June of 2000. And so on September 11th, 2001, I was in Iceland at the time. So on that day, there was, a number of hijackers who crashed buildings and planes to kill people, supposedly in the name of a god. And I was like, that's so on September 12th, ultimately I declared myself an atheist on September 12th, because being in the military, like, I'm willing to die for the country, for freedoms. I'm willing to die for the guy to the left and right of me. Like, that's not really a problem, but like, I'm not really down for the idea of laying it on the line for God or a God, or, so it's like, I'm not really connected with my faith at all. So like, I'm just going to let that go. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me. So I was never angry at God. And I'm not labeling myself an agnostic. I wasn't like, oh, there's something out there. I was just like, it's nothing. And so for a period of time, I was just a kind of a passive atheist. And then, pretty cool story, actually. So yeah, I guess I'm going to tell the long version of the story. So
I'd love to hear it.
Please do. Yeah, please do.
All right. So I was an atheist for a few years, and I was stationed in Iceland. I'm sorry. And it was time for me to get orders. And I was like, I've been in Iceland. This sucks. I want to go somewhere warm. So I was able to get orders to Cuba. And the way and I don't know how it works now, but back then, the way it worked out was between duty stations, you get a period of time off. The military pays for you to kind of go to your home of record or back home in the States, give you some time off, and then they ship you off to your next duty station. And so you really don't have any say-so on connecting flights or hotels or anything like that, which was all well and good. But on my trip to Cuba, it worked out basically where I was going to fly from Chicago to Virginia, and then get into Virginia, and say it must have been a Friday it had to have been a Friday evening, and then stay at a hotel, and then catch a military flight to Cuba from Virginia the next morning. And so by the time I got to my hotel room in Virginia that Friday night, it's like 11:30, something like that. And I wasn't particularly worn out, but I was like, tired. I'm going to sleep. I get to my hotel room. There's not an alarm clock. I call the front desk like, hey, do you do wake up calls? Like, no, we don't do wake up calls. It's 2003 and I was overseas the whole time. So it's like I had a cell phone anyways. So like all I had was like, like a Timex Casio watch or something like that. And it's like, well, I'm going to set my alarm and hope I hear it, for 5 a.m. or whatever it was. Now that I'm in F3, I wake up a lot earlier than 5 on my own. At the time. So ultimately what happened is I slept through my alarm and I was like, oh man, this is not good. Like I was pretty squared away sailor. Like I don't do late. I don't like to be late. I want to be.
Yeah. Did you get in trouble for that?
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that. So, so I, still show up to the airport at like, 7:30, 8 o'clock, whatever it was, like, hey, did you hold the plane for me? They didn't, so I just check into the dirtbag barracks of like, the barracks where everyone goes, where they're in like some kind of weird administrative limbo for one reason, good, bad, or indifferent. And the next flight to Cuba, they left on Tuesday. And so Tuesday morning, I get to the airport nice and early. And especially back then, the name Tight Lip really, really would have fit me. So I get to the airport and like, I'm just there early, kind of have like my MP3 player and a book. I'm just going to be in my own headspace, get on the plane and figure out what kind of apology and punishment I have coming my way when I show up, a duty station, 4 days late. But sitting in the airport, I see this girl walk by in an orange coat and I like see the orange coat lady and like, oh, she's pretty. And kind of go back to reading and whatever and all that stuff. And they call for the boarding of the plane. And I'm like one of the first guys on the plane because, again, I'm going to get on this plane. And I sit down in my seat, window seat, and kind of getting settled in, getting everything, situated where I'll be able to, get my headphones on and, read my book once we're in the air. And the orange coat lady gets on the plane and like, oh, there's the orange coat lady, that's cool. And then she sits down next to me. And I'm like, well, that's weird, but like, I, didn't have I'm not a smooth guy. I don't have the confidence. And it's just like one of those things like, I really just want to move through the pleasantries of, hey, how you doing? We're going to sit next to each other for 4 hours. Bye. That's just, really all I got. And so I'm still kind of like looking forward to getting back to this book. And the lady sits down next to me. She goes, hi. And I'm like, oh, here we go. I got to take this conversation for a while so I can get it over with. I'm like, hey, so what ended up happening is I talked to this woman for 4 hours and probably like 14 months after that, we got married.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Cool.
What a story.
Well, what was special about that is, there's a concept in faith where if your faith scales, 0 to 100, where 0, you have no awareness of God, and 100, you're Billy Graham or the Pope or some famous, spiritual leader. That 50 mark is the, 0 through 49, you're building up to faith. That 50 mark is you stepping across that line of saying, yes, I have, faith in Jesus Christ, that he died for my sins and that he wants me to celebrate life with him in heaven in eternity. And then 51 to 99 is, hey, welcome to the team. Let's just get you better and live life and love it. But my wife was incredibly gracious and kind and helping me to develop my faith and never really pushed me to accelerate, or to decide prematurely for myself. So I give her a lot of credit for getting me from like, the 20 to the 49 mark and, for me to get able to step over that line of faith. But then, so circling back to like, my personal faith journey and how I got so strong is, I have a lot of gratitude towards God for taking me back, essentially. Here I am saying, you didn't exist, you didn't matter, all the work of creation, majesty of it, I just, kind of spat in the face of it. And so, as I think about my faith, like I'm not proud of my atheism, but I'm thankful for the perspective my atheism has able to offer me and it makes me have so much more gratitude and solidarity in my own faith. It also helps me be able to meet people a little bit more easily where they're at if they're struggling in their faith journey, because my faith is 100% real to me. I understand that someone's lack of faith, to them at that point, it's real to them too. But you have this sense that there's a longing to be filled with something more, that something's missing. To be able to help people find their path, and that is one of the best things. It is the best thing we can do with our lives.
Yeah. Wow. First of all, what a great story, and how, I mean, I don't know if you can think of another way that God works than putting a lady in an orange jacket next to you who ends up becoming your wife.
Story of the lady in the orange coat.
Yeah. Just a perfect example of, God putting someone in your life, and just the miraculous way that God works, right? To put this lady in the orange coat next to you, who later becomes your wife and helps you through your walk with Christ to get you to 49%, whatever that is. I'm astounded by that, but I like what you said after that, which is about shepherding people and sharing the word and sharing where your faith comes from and stuff like that. So I am genuinely curious if you've had the opportunity to shepherd other believers, and what your experience has been with that.
I have, had that, 40 to 49 experience. One thing that is part of my story is I grew up not knowing my dad. I met him when I was 22. Finally, he's a wonderful man. He wasn't around for me growing up. And so I had, a strong absence of a father figure in my life. One thing that I really am grateful for is there was a couple of men that I had experiences with when I was growing up that really did make a positive impact on me. And they were fairly passive. And so this isn't like to make it sound like my childhood was awful and miserable or anything like that. But one of the houses we lived at in DeKalb, Illinois, there was an apartment building right next to us. And there's a chain link fence between my parents, my mom and my stepdad's duplex, and this apartment complex. And this guy next door, he had the ground floor apartment, and he'd often be out there grilling burgers and drinking beer. And when he was out there doing that, he would, if my Frisbee went over the fence, he would just chuck it back, or, we'd play catch over the fence or something like that. And he was just nice to me. His kindness made such an impression on me that I want to be able to give that to other people. One of the things that will absolutely make me late to something is if a kid wants to play catch, and he lacks that strong masculine companionship to be able to have someone to do that with. All right, kid. Yep, I'm your guy. The other one was later on in life. I was playing roller hockey in the street and stuff like that when I was a kid. And there was this guy named Chuck, and he was probably 26, 27. He grew up in Minnesota and played ice hockey, and he was just super into playing hockey. And so he'd just come out and he'd play aggressive hockey with us. And he'd kind of, call us out if we were getting a little bit too, out of line with our behavior or anything like that, or, and so just realizing that there's people that can be touchstones in your life, don't have these big, proverbial come to Jesus conversations with you, or hey, here's how to be a man conversations, that they just show it to you. Because of my own life, I know that those examples matter. So anytime I've ever tried to be well, I wonder if I can, help the scoreboard along in this situation and getting this guy from, 45 to 42 or 49 to 51, it's just best if I don't. And hey, you want to talk about Jesus? Cool. Let's do it. And hopefully you get a chance to hear about Jesus just by being around me. By no means am I doing that every time or every day. But I hope it's recognized. I mean, there's so many high quality men in F. It also can just be white noise, but I don't go out there with a special purpose of doing it, but I realize that it's something we're still called to do.
Heck yeah. I love the simplicity of it, Later Pony. And part of that is just those little interactions and being consistent in how you treat other people, and we have an opportunity to do that every morning, right? Every day, every interaction, right, is a chance to be that way. So I love just your perspective that we probably aren't very effective at if we're focused on that score, right, we're probably not the best at moving somebody along, right? We let sort of God do that work in their heart, or, Holy Spirit. But, I would be curious too, as you think about your faith, obviously you're meeting in that way. It was really special, but anything else that's sort of part of your story that really has just helped to solidify for you over the years that, like, yep, this is what I believe and what I need to be, sort of making the center of my life?
The short answer is no. Atheism, I mean, that's, building, yeah, I guess having my faith, swallow into the vacuum of atheism. It's it's just freeing. Like, I mean, there are circumstances where, things could be pretty bad in life, and as long as you have faith, man, it's just so much easier to deal with. And so, I mean, I'm thankful I can't point to, like, oh yeah, I had this other deep, deep, deep tragedy and it saw me through it. I don't want to invite that into my life, but like, I genuinely trust that it's there. Like, I do feel like my faith is unshakable in that sense. And I'm really thankful that I do have great guys within F3, within my church community that really, again, can walk alongside me too, should something really, truly tragic come along. There was a period of time before my daughter was born, which is actually a fantastic way to talk about receiving the flag of paradise. Before my daughter was born, my wife and I were pregnant, and it turned out to be an ectopic pregnancy. And so basically the baby had planted in a fallopian tube, but it was like really terribly close to the uterus. And eventually, the baby grew and it ruptured. Unfortunately, it ruptured an artery in my wife as well. And so she is internally bleeding. And, it was our first pregnancy. We didn't know any better. So we just kind of thought she was going through a bout of warring sickness. And eventually this kind of came to be where, like, hey, we need to get you to the ER. Like, we were in a office, and they were kind of like, nah, it's just morning sickness. And, she's kind of like fainting and looking pale. And so it's like, I drove her from a doctor's office to a women's hospital, where one, Dr. Jacoby performed emergency life-saving surgery on my wife. And Dr. Jacoby is the same of, Jacoby of Retweet, where I received the flag from paradise. But so even during those circumstances where, like, my wife is giving me if I die, please, find someone else that, to love and cherish, that'll love you back. Like, those are big gulp conversations that, you don't want to hear as your wife kind of leaves to go off to a DOR type of a deal. But even in that circumstance, like, my faith wasn't like, I'm not a why God. Like, it's an opportunity to kind of share that, we live in a broken world full of sin, and it's not all part of God's master plan to, make something bad happen. It's a byproduct of sin. And unfortunately, we live in that world, but there's redemption and a path out of that goes way beyond the life that we live here.
Yeah. I love, like, from your perspective, you're like, no, there's no other events. And then you've got these other things that clearly have been, like, and maybe they're not like huge, necessarily tragic things, but certainly times where God has revealed his faithfulness to you, and so I think it's so cool just to, just for guys to realize that, God is working, even in some of the things 100%. That maybe we perceive as little, right? It doesn't, you don't have to have some crazy tragic thing go on to have really big faith. Like, I think it's just, it's cool to hear you share that sort of stuff. And how cool, I do, before we move on to the leadership at Paradise, I know you wanted to give a quick plug for the Impact Retreat, and so would just love to give you some space to kind of share.
Thanks for bringing it up. I know it's I'm not
life.
sure when this is going to release, but this might be like the right time of year to be given that, like, a proper commercial and some airtime. I went to the Impact Retreat this past year, and those guys do such a great job of creating several pockets of space for you to be able to journey through what they're asking you to journey. And it's a journey that's absolutely worthwhile. So early on in 2024, I'd lost my job, was laid off. And, I probably bring that up just as essence, like it's been a, a pretty wild year of, being unemployed, finding employment that really disrupts my rhythms of being able to post as much in F3. It's been a very, very disruptive year. And in light of all that, and kind of going back to years previous, that impact retreat is the most life-giving experience I had really in a number of years. Because again, just how they go about approaching that time, it's excellent. And a quiet little like pro tip too is, highly encourage you to apply to go. I know they only have a certain number of spots, so it can be a little tricky, but I just please consider applying. But I ended up, we're all like a kind of a group message at the beginning, and like samples end up thrown out there is like, hey, my son needs to use the Jeep. Anyone give me a ride out there? And I was like, I don't know samples. I'm 5'9", he's like 7'4", and he's a respect guy, and I'm not, and I really don't have like a lot, post the same place maybe once or twice a week kind of a thing. But it's like, yeah, I'll give you a ride. Me and samples is so much relationship building on that car ride up there and then back. We did happen to be in the same group too, which is just really cool. But yeah, the interpersonal growth that you have the opportunity to experience there is amazing. The relationship building is amazing. And there's a few surprises within that I'm not going to share. Gosh, they're really special.
Yeah. They do a phenomenal job.
You would think of all the stuff I talk about, I wouldn't get emotional about that. But man, there's some moments there that they do such a good job of. Couldn't encourage guys to apply to go more.
Yeah. Well, and if guys are listening, definitely get, we do it every year, right? So, and I know we've talked about adding it another time throughout the year too. So hopefully one of these days we'll do a second one, because I had a chance to go as well a couple of years ago, and couldn't agree more. I mean, it was just, just the way they execute, right, and put that those couple days together, and then being there with a group of guys that you trust and can share and be vulnerable with, and just the combination of things in that environment. I left there feeling just on fire, and I've tried, admittedly, I've tried to recreate some of those things on my own, and I've been wildly unsuccessful in doing that on my own. Even just the quiet time, having space to go and walk around outside and sort of listen to God. You would think I could do that in my, where I live, and it. I don't know.
Yeah, and I'd say,
really special about the way
all you need to do is be open to growth, open to interpersonal growth, and there's a faith tether with that, but like you don't need to be Ned Flanders, to get the most out of that, but you don't need to be like desperately searching for God either. You can just all you need to just be curious, right. Curious and willing, and the rest of it kind of takes care of itself as long as you're willing to be open to it.
Yeah. Heck yeah. Well, I do want to get your thoughts on, leadership, right? Our mission, we want to invigorate or reinvigorate male community leadership. And you had a chance to grab the flag from Retweet, or receive the flag from Retweet, and then lead and then hand it off. And so I would just love to hear kind of what that experience was like for you. And we always like to get kind of your process for succession planning too. So if you don't mind sharing with us how you did
process
that.
For succession planning. So I think Retweet was like maybe 2 or 3 months into his stewardship of the flag. I think I recognized pretty early on that like I was going to be the guy, because Wednesday was like the one site where, I wasn't the best at push-ups. I'm not like a strong guy. I'm an okay runner. And so like Paradise was like my break for the week, because it's like, okay, I'm going to trot for 3/4 mile or a mile and a half or whatever, do some push-ups, and we're going to go do it again. Like I can do that for a good while. So like it was like an enjoyable day for me to go to. Plus, and they had the Q source discussion afterwards. It was great. And then, through watching Namarama videos, like I kind of caught that like last name Jacoby. As like, so one day I come up to after like, hey, do you know Rebecca Jacoby? Yeah, that's my wife. So then, kind of tell that whole story of, hey, your wife saved my wife's life. And, my first Q there, it's the only COT that I've ever fully written out, because the emotion of that is just too huge. Because, and the truth of the matter is there's a number of doctors that probably could have saved my wife's life that day. but the expertise and care and the professionalism that his wife was able to perform that day enabled it enabled us to be able to have more kids. So, to have a son and a daughter, because she wasn't just focused on saving a life. She is focused on preserving life. So a tremendous amount of gratitude to the Jacoby family. But yeah, so it just became apparent that Tight Lip's going to get the flag pretty early on. So then, once I got the flag, two things were really important to me about being a site Q. One was Q source. I love that it's a Q source site. Again, just being able to have the opportunity to have the deep discussion, so much value in that. The other thing was, it's exciting to watch a guy discover they can run. You don't need to be Farva or unicycle or one of the many great runners we have in F3 to enjoy running. And like I said, for myself, when I first started going to Paradise Island, we're going to trot it out for 3/4 of a mile, then we're going to take a break. It's totally fine with me that we're not the most amazing go hard AO for running. But what we are is we're a site that we're going to pick up the 6. We're going to, if you're in the back of the pack by yourself, you won't be there for long. And by, I mean 20 seconds before you realize that oh crap, there's somebody back there. Let's go pick them up. I love that guys can feel comfortable to do that there. So when it came to, succession planning, it was basically a combination of 2.5 things. So be a site Q who's going to care about guys being able to find their running legs, to be a guy who can, be an advocate and a champion for Q source. And then the third thing, which retweet kind of told me about and I was aware of, but it's really a thing, is being able to financially cover the cost of crappy coffee.
Yeah.
A few months before my tenure was up, I found that Mayday is a really consistent attender at Q Source. He is the guy I just described about being able to find his running legs. He showed up and he was, admittedly just not that into running, but he just was there because he knew it was good for him. And I just checked into Paradise this past weekend, and he's up there leading the pack. It's great to see how much that man has slimmed down, strengthened up. I mean, it's great. He's everything you want in a site Q for Paradise.
Well, and the way I hear it from him now, the coffee at Marriott is almost free.
I think he asked to raise the prices. Right. Yeah. Unfortunately, Anne over there at Wheatfield, she passed a number of months ago, and that kind of caused a little bit of a disruption to their staffing and service, so they weren't able to support us as easily. So we needed to make a change. I mean, so that kudos to Mayday. I'm sure when you're interviewing him in a year, I'm gonna want to hear that story, because hey, here's a flag, some new site Q responsibilities. Also, you got to move your AO. Also, you got a new place for Q source. Good luck. And because of my job, the week after I handed off the flag, I've yet to attend a full Paradise beatdown. I show up for a pre-run and maybe a little tickle of the beatdown, and that's it.
Yeah. I love it. I really do appreciate too you mentioned earlier sort of, F3 Omaha sticking to its roots and the value and the sort of intention that Q Source, adds in that space. Cause I do, I remember when we started Q Source and, in 2018 when we launched Paradise, they didn't have the Q Source published yet, right? They were sort of working on developing it, and they published it later, and we quickly embedded it into that site. And it's just key, right? I mean, and as we expand and grow, trying to always ask the question of, should this be a Q Source site, or do we have an option for the guys in whatever area? Cause it's just so important, and you've continued to keep that legacy going. And it's something that the way you do that is finding the next leader that can also keep doing that. And I love that Mayday is the guy for that. I know, it's just, it's just cool to see. One of the things that, as we hear your story, Well, a couple things. I just want to affirm, like, man, like just who you are, as a man, as a leader, you know, your faith, the passions you have for leading other men, other people. I love it. I'm just glad that I get to know you and get the chance to be next to you. You know, would also just want to say, you know, your story is so powerful, you know, so I hope guys don't take your nickname for granted, right? I hope they realize through this conversation that, hey, wait a minute, he
100%.
will open up, right? He is willing to share his story. So I hope next time they see you out there, they dig a little deeper, ask you some of those deep questions. But where we like to kind of land with guys is just to kind of get from you, you know, current state, wherever you're at with life, what could we be praying for? Where do you maybe need encouragement?
Yeah, definitely.
Anything on that list for you?
You know, I'm really thankful that, you know, so I was unemployed for a period of time, but fortunately I received a very, you know, generous severance. So I was able to post as much as I wanted. I was able to, you know, drop off my kid at school, pick her up. I mean, and that relationship building was precious, and just in a great place with my kids. We're a good relationship with my kids, great relationship with my wife. You know, professionally though, I'm still trying to find my footing. You know, there's periods of time where, you know, it doesn't feel like reinventing, but it feels like, you know, I'm needing to pick a lane. And then I also need to, you know, find opportunity in that lane. So as far as, you know, prayers and what's on my mind, you know, it's definitely trying to align where God wants me to be, or where God will allow me to be, and what my heart wants, and balance it all with, you know, time, family, resources, and everything like that. That's my greatest nut to crack right now. And as far as like catching me out there in the gloom, I mean, it's challenging right now. I have to be at the office at 6:30. I can shower there, but, you know, it basically means Monday through Thursday, you know, I have to catch it would be a 5:15 beat down. That's within, you know, driving distance to north side of Springfield. And so, you know, for the most part, I'll smurf on Mondays to the district, or, you know, catch a couple pre-runs around town. You know, and then Friday mornings, I'm still the part of that Men of God group. So I'm kind of splitting time between that and F3. Yeah, but I miss being out there regularly. But 100% to your point, though, yeah, I'm not terribly tight-lipped. I can be a little tough to get a hold of in a pre-run. If you want to talk with me, 100%, let's talk. You just got to start talking to me right away. Because one thing I don't like to do is I don't like to wait around.
Yeah.
If there's nothing to wait around for, so I just get to work. One of my pet peeves of that can happen in the gloom sometimes is, you know, we got a good workout going. We're kind of talking it up a little bit, and let's say we're doing 11s, and like, okay, group finishes to 11s, but we're going to wait for the 6 to finish. Like, well, if we're all going to stand around for 45 seconds to 2 minutes, let's lay in the cold grass and do flutter kicks until the 6 is done, or go run alongside them.
Yeah.
We don't need to stand around and do nothing, because that's not what we woke up early to do. Oh, I'll run an 11-minute mile,
Right.
you know, and talk with you. But
I love it.
it's just really,
Yeah. Well, maybe we get some guys together and do a pre Q
fantastic.
source, so you can get your Q source fill, right?
or
4
is it called
a.m.
night
Q
Q
source discussion, right? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, Far would have to ultimately rule on if that's a night Q source or not. Wow, I love it, man. Hey, let's do a little name around here to wrap this up. I'll start. Brandon Freddy 38, the Plague.
42, tight lip.
Tight lip, nice. And we don't say anything.
Yeah,
There's no call sign,
I thought
because
doing the
you
finger
just
thing.
tight lip, and right.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
You too.
Awesome.
Take care.
I appreciate your time, man. Have a good rest of your day.